lose my job, right? But once I'd calm down, we could have a discussion. And actually, he just didn't like it, right? He knew that saying something like that would get the landlord, but he just didn't like it. So it was clear to me we had to do some other work, right? Thank God I didn't kill him. I didn't even yell at him. And you know what happened is he finally got an apartment, and he was able not to say those dumb things during the interview. So we're going to do some skill building. We're going to see how people relate to each other. It's really important that we go with people. Same as home visits. When people are in apartments, we want to visit them in their home because we want to see what their skill level is. And we want to be able to concentrate on that. Okay, I have somebody in the chat. Any other agencies actually reviewing apartments with the client during COVID moving forward? Okay, so that's a good question. So sometimes what happens is that people are not going out because of COVID, but it's an easy habit to get into. Look, frankly, going out with people during this process is a pain, right? Oftentimes you got to drive a while, you got to get the client there. So Michael says they view the apartment prior to the approval. So yes, and they do it with the client. We can teach the client a bunch of different things. One is how to talk to the landlord. The other is how to evaluate the apartment. We're going to give you a priority listing here. And the other one is we can teach people about what are the expectations in terms of habitability so that they can ask for repairs from their landlord. So there's a lot of skills we can teach during this process, and it has been invaluable. I know this is tough. During COVID, some people are doing it by Zoom. So they have somebody who goes to the apartment and films it with their phone, and you sit with the client and the landlord on a Zoom call and talk to each other. So there are ways to do it remotely. It's a bigger pain, but it's something we want to really consider. Okay, so I'm gonna put up a poll here. And we are going to talk about, I think I'm going to put up a poll. Where is it? There it is. We're going to talk about what are families looking for? So this is the other thing. So I'm going to launch this poll. Everybody see it? It's multiple choice. So we'll give you a couple of seconds here. Does everybody see the poll? Yes? Okay.
My question, can you give multiple choice? Can I give multiple answers here?
Absolutely. You can give multiple answers, as many as you want. In fact, most of the people we work with are looking for multiple things, right? Okay, I'm going to give it a couple more seconds.
I'm going to say they look for every single one of those things.
That's fine. That's an important piece of information. Okay, we're pretty close. So I'm going to end the polling in a second. Ready? All right. So in fact, many people checked all of them, but the biggest one was a specific area. And we're going to talk through that. Is that what people are asking for? In my experience, it's usually a specific area where the rents are really high. Is that true? No? Okay. The other big one is price. Good. That's a good one. The other one is close to transportation, which I know can be a challenge. I'm seeing that about 9 people said people are looking for a subsidy, which is lower than usual than we get with these polls. That's a good thing. Some people are looking for a house. We always want those long-term goals. People are looking for a large unit. Okay, specific kitchen, no, okay. So I'm sorry, I meant to share the results. You see this? People have comments about this? We're going to go through these. Okay.
Well, I have one quick comment is
Sure.
the finding the apartments that fit all these categories is extremely difficult.
That's exactly right.
Because like Michael was saying, a lot of the clients either one don't have income or just general assistance, and landlords just aren't going to deal with it.
You're right. So Anybody moved in the past year or two? Anybody in this group moved? Okay, Carmen, did you get everything you wanted? When you were looking for an apartment, did you get every single thing you wanted?
Of course not.
Right,
Always want something bigger and better, but you got to be realistic.
right.
So-
So we're going to use some of these things, Mark, that people ask for as longer term goals to inspire people to maintain their tenancy so they can leverage that good landlord reference to get the things that they want. And we're going to do exactly what you said to do with landlords. We're going to negotiate it. And we've got a tool for that, actually. And we're going to go through this. The expectation is it's important to know what people want, both short-term and long-term, but nobody gets everything they want. And we're going to have to negotiate that. So that's the premise here. There is no expectation that you're going to get everything you want. Frankly, if you could get people everything they wanted in terms of housing, you'd be you'd be on Oprah, right? I mean, the reality is we have to teach people how to negotiate and prioritize, and that's where we're going.
Maybe I do things a little different, and every time I go to one of these, my background's a little different than this.
Yeah.
But when I do the initial intake with someone who was referred,
Yeah.
I just tell them what's out there, and in the look that we, this is what you're going to be looking for. This is what you're going to have to really pay attention to. There's some things that I try to give them realistic expectations that, yeah, everybody wants a big yard, I think, and everybody wants an updated kitchen, but I know from this area and the landlords I work with, you're probably not going to get it. So I try to tell people right from the get-go, your expectations, unfortunately, in this area have to be a little lower. And I know that from years and years of experience in working in this area and the 2 years I've been with Rapid Rehousing. So I don't try to set people up when they tell me, I want a 4-bedroom. And I'm like, well, there's 2 of you, so that ain't going to happen. So let's forget that right now, because I know what a 4-bedroom in the area goes for. We're not going to do that. I'm not even looking at it. And that made me wrong on my part, but I don't want to set people up for failure either. I know they're not going to get a 4-bedroom for what the fair market rent is, nor do 2 people need it. So I try to be very realistic with the people I work with, but I don't sugarcoat for the people I work with. They're grown adults and they may have some issues, but we all do. But I just tell them flat out, what I can do, what I can help you do, and we do work together, but I'm not going to leave them with false expectations when they leave my office. It's just not going to happen.
I hear you, Michael, but one of the things that we want to make sure of is that people have some hope in the process. And yes, people want a yard. They want a yard for their kids to play in. They want to be in an area where their kids can go to a good school. So I'm not suggesting you sugarcoat it. What I'm suggesting is you negotiate it. You know what? A 4-bedroom when you have 2 people in your family is a big ask. We want to ask them, why is that important? It may be important for reasons of privacy. It may be important for reasons of how can we address the things that underlie that? Just ask them why, right? And we're asking you to talk about, you know what? It may be possible to get a 4-bedroom, right? But it might be helpful if we look at the prices of the 4-bedroom so we can integrate that into our plans, right? That you increase your income so that might be possible in the future. But that they're more than one step towards the goal. So we never recommend that people sort of dash people's hopes, because those long-term goals keep them focused and keep them housed, right? If the reason that they're following the lease is so they can get a landlord reference so that they have a better chance of getting a bigger apartment, and I'm not even suggesting that they move from a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom into a 4-bedroom is a possibility, maybe, but it's maybe a process. So we tie the things to the short-term goals, and we reiterate that our program is short-term. The other thing that we've got to address is this is likely the first time that the people we worked with have been helped in this way, and they think it's their only shot. So taking some time to explain what are the other possibilities and what are the other resources to move forward in the future, that this is not their only shot. And that one of the things that we want to do is raise people's expectations. So I'm just suggesting, and my hunch is you probably have these conversations. It's like, look, you're never getting a 4-bedroom. So if you want a 4-bedroom, move on, right? It's probably more like explaining it to people and acknowledging that people might have these long-term goals. The long-term goals provide people with a structure and a purpose and a reason to change behaviors in order to accomplish those goals. And we want that, we need that so that people will sustain housing. And as Rachel said, part of the point of rapid rehousing is not only finding and paying the rent, it's not all about housing access, it's also about people staying in there. So we want to lay the groundwork right from the beginning. Does that make sense? It's probably pretty close to what you're doing, right?
Yes.
So part of this is we have the conversation. This reflects some of the stuff Michael said. So talk housing to people every chance you get. Here's the tougher part. Have people in hotels, have people in shelters, have people in outreach, talk housing to people all the time. We're going to ask them, what is it going to take? We're going to ask people to think critically about what it's going to take to access and sustain housing, right? We're going to ask people what the options are, and we're going to be prepared to talk about the options. And I've got some options on the next page, but I'm counting on you guys to add some. We're going to also talk to people about eligibility criteria. You're going to hear people say, I just want a Section 8 voucher. So, okay, so that could be a long-term goal, right? They could try to get on the list if the PHAs have them open. They can put in applications for those long-term goals. But in the meantime, you don't want to stay where you are in order to get that. And how can rapid rehousing get that to you? You know, in rapid rehousing, some people are going to graduate from rapid rehousing and pay 60% of their income towards rent. Is that reasonable? Is that what we're thinking? They're going to pay a lot of their income towards rent. But if there's a light at the end of the tunnel where they may be able to move it down to 30%, that's really important. I imagine SSVF hears, I want a VASH voucher, right? I mean, that's what I would be screaming if I was in SSVF. Same thing. It's actually a Section 8 voucher, but it's specifically for veterans. So we need to talk to people about that. What are the requirements? What are the eligibility? I also tell people that while they're in rapid rehousing, they don't lose their homeless designation. So they are still a priority in some of these lists. We want to talk to people about what are their rights, both in terms of applying for housing and accessing housing, but also in sustaining housing. What are their responsibilities, both for access and for sustaining? And we want to always connect it to those long-term goals that people are talking about, right? You want housing for your kids where they have a yard. You know, a big thing that the families I worked with said is, I don't want to look poor. I don't want my kids to look poor. Let's talk about how we can work on that long-term. Let's talk about how we can work on that short-term, so that it's really important that rapid rehousing be connected to their long-term goals. We also need to understand their housing preferences, and I'm going to go to the preference sheet because I'm going to show you about this. All right. So one of the things that we want to do is set it up to negotiate. Remember, we talked about that? So we want to ask people, okay, is there a neighborhood or location you want to live in? Okay, so where are you now? You're in a hotel, you're in a shelter, right? This would be my dream. Otherwise, one was long-term goals. And this is what I would accept. This is negotiable or non-negotiable, right? And so we want to gear it down to the priorities. You see, there's a lot of things: unit type, housing type, right? Access to transportation, all the things that you guys mentioned. So we want to set people up for a negotiation. And this is not a bad way to do it. So just by raising your hand or giving a thumbs up or giving a thumbs down, do you think this system would be helpful to you? Do you think this tool would be helpful to you? Actually, people look at tools differently, and people are easily able to understand it, and it gives you a way to negotiate. You may not need it. Anybody here think this might be helpful? Yep.
Is this a HUD form or is this something that you guys made up?
Made up. But I will say in the VA, so we've done training for the VA for the last 10 years, and we frequently give this to SSVF. It's part of the curriculum that we give to GPD programs, which is just about to go national, and it's part of what we give to HUD Bash.
I've done GPD and of course I work SSVF now, but I've never seen this. We do use what's
It's
called
new.
a housing stability plan, which is similar
Right.
to goals and such, but I kind of like this form because when the clients fill it out, they kind of get a reality check on where they're at and what they can do.
Yeah, and it gives you a point to understand what their priorities are and what their long-term goals are. So Mark, the VA is familiar with this form. The GPD program, we just began to implement it. It's part of a training package that happened in LA, and it's going to be offered throughout the country soon. It's part of a CTI, or critical time intervention package, that hopefully people will be offered. The VA is actually just put in a proposal so they can do this training. So that's why you haven't seen it, but HUD Bash has definitely seen it, and it's in their SharePoint. Okay. Sometimes it's important.
Andrea,
And your continuing
we
care has definitely seen it. Yes, Jen.
we ask a lot of these questions at Catholic Charities, Brenda and I, about
Right.
where you want to live, what area,
Yep.
so we do this, but I do like this form. This gets a little bit more in depth because we don't have, things like cooking or meal service or anything of that nature. So this is a really great form, but we do get in depth with our clients about where they do want to live and what side of the county and that type of thing. So this is a great form.
That's great. And then, but the most important, it's got a lot of stuff on it. So you're going to get it in a Word document, so you can change it around if you want. You can add things, which, sometimes it is. So instead of location and neighborhood, it might be what part of the county, that sort of thing. So if people look familiar, so you're welcome to do that. These are yours. It's also important to help case managers conceptualize that the ideal is often their long-term goals. And that's what's going to motivate them to sustain housing. So we want to make sure that we get that. And also, as part of this process, we're going to ask people basically the so that question. I want a 4-bedroom apartment. Okay, what's going to happen if you get a 4-bedroom apartment? So that what? And people will tell you things so that I have privacy. Okay, so it's really privacy and the ability to have privacy that's a priority. And then you know what you can negotiate. So helping people do that is really important. So we call that the so that principle. It was actually invented by a VA team in Texas. And what they said is every time somebody says a goal, we ask them, so that what? So that we get the reasons behind the goal and what their expectations are. And that's a lot of what that's based on. So I should also answer Mark's question in another way. All the forms we're showing you are not official forms, either for your COC, your coordinated access, or for the VA. These are suggestions, and you can integrate them into your other forms, right? But the thing that I am suggesting, that if you have 2 forms that serve the same purpose, in my experience and in myself as a case manager, I would do neither. So don't have 2 forms for the same purpose. If you can combine them, that's great. But you can feel free to move this around.
And I'll say one thing I really like about this that I think is really important, this form or whatever form, I like that it is going to compare like where I am now to what I would like and what I would accept. So even if it's not their ideal, it can like show them visually, and it goes through the process mentally of comparing what they can get with where they are. And so even if what they can get isn't their ideal, it's showing them how it's better than where they currently are. So
and that's really important, and people lose sight of that. Look, the people that we work with have been in crisis their whole life. So what happens in crisis is you come up with one thing that you want and you push for that. And if you don't get it, you give up. And we don't want people to do that. It also broadens it out. And Rachel's right. We can compare it. You can also say when somebody is looking at housing, hey, you know what? These have 2-year high price. This apartment has 2-year high priority things. and 2 of your lesser priority things. This other one is 3 of your high priority things, but you know what? It only has 1 of your lesser priority things. So it gives them a way to do the comparison as well. And it reflects how far they have come and that it shows them progress. So you're welcome to this. Rachel, you guys have all these forms, right? Can you send them out or can we? They were in the package. Great. Okay.
Andrea, it's a lot like the ESG housing planning
Yes,
that
it
we
is.
put in the chart. Yeah.
Yes, it is. We worked on some of that. Okay. So let me give you an example. Okay. So Marcia and her daughters have been in the shelter for months. Marcia only wants to live in a 1 section of the city so that her children can go to a good school. She also wants a 3-bedroom apartment. She's got 2 kids and herself, so everybody gets their own room. And it's important because it's important her children have privacy. Marcia's working part-time in retail, right? So she's probably making about $8 an hour. And she's uncomfortable working while her children are out of school. So she's not looking to work any more than part-time. She currently does not make enough money to even pay for a studio apartment where she wants to live. So what are some options for Marcia? Put it in the chat box or just call it out. What do you think? Yes, shared living. That's a really good example, right? So perhaps she can get a larger apartment, right? But she lives with another family and they share expenses. The other thing is if she's living with another family, they can share childcare. So she might not be so nervous, right? So that's a great one. Prioritize school or the apartment. Yes, you want to see what the priorities are and what the school are. She's clearly worried about safety of her children. So the other thing that we may want to focus on is keeping a safe environment, and she might want to consider other places if she could feel safe there. Okay. So what is the likely outcome of these things is part of the likely outcome is part of these discussions is she's going to burrow down into her option. No, I want to live in Rehoboth Beach within walking distance of town, and I want my kids to go to this school. Okay. All right. So what it means is we keep talking. We keep talking about what are her options and what is she wanting out of this. We are not telling her she can't get what she wants. We are breaking down what she wants so she can get part of what she wants, which may be safety for the children and may also be privacy. Yep, rapid resolution. In other words, negotiating skills, right? So the rapid resolution training was developed by a group in Cleveland, Ohio. And rapid resolution is really based on conflict resolution skills and the mediators that came out of the court system and were working with housing problems. So understanding mediating skills is really important. Okay, so those are good things that can be used in the negotiation process. We want to assume that everything is a negotiation. Look, nobody who's been homeless doesn't understand. There's no such thing as a free lunch, right? But we want to also understand what's behind those things. So that's good. All right. So we want to know what our options are. You guys brought up shared housing. That's great. 2 families or 2 people living together, they can share expenses. There are some advantages to that. There's some disadvantages to that. We're going to think about that. There's some real advantages to that. We're going to think about what their history is in sharing apartments with other people. We're going to introduce different things. You can bifurcate the unit, or bifurcating the unit means that each family has a lease for half of the unit. It's pretty hard to negotiate with landlords. Or we can have people look at themselves as a family unit under a head of household, and the head of household is eligible for rapid rehousing, and then that family becomes eligible for rapid rehousing. So remember, HUD's definition of family is basically, can be a single person, can be another, can be two people, can be somebody with a disability, somebody without a disability, somebody who is elderly, somebody who's not elderly. In other words, it can be anybody. So this group in this training could define ourselves as a family, but it would be difficult to find housing for 30 people all at once. Yep, provide, maybe the school offers school care. That's a really good option. So you guys are already thinking about at the beginning you triage your needs. Yep, but she triages our needs. That's an important part. It's all connected. That's why I say prioritize. Yes, we want to help people prioritize. If we prioritize for people, I don't know, how do you guys feel about when people prioritize for you? Decide what's important to you. Anybody got a member of their family who tells them what's really important?
I don't mind listening to other people's input. Now, whether I use it as another story.
Right.
Now, in a lot of cases with the people that we deal with, they've been told many times that this is what you need to do. This is what you need to do. And
Right.
they do it. They're right back to square one again.
That's
So
right.
it's really important that we try to make it come from them instead of us
Exactly.
dictating.
Really good point. Because you know what? If we tell them what we think is right, they see it as take it or leave it. And they have no time to process it. And a lot of times people leave it. And that's a really, that can be really, you don't want people to walk away from this process. I send a form to all clients asking what the three most important goals to achieve and how I can, as a case manager, achieve those goals. That's a great thing. It sounds a little bit like one of the ways that we suggest people do it is in a warm handoff from a shelter or hotels, because they're going to know what people's dreams are, and that they talk about the things that they've worked together on, and they meet with the new worker, and that's how they establish goals. Sometimes it's overwhelming to ask people what their three most important goals are, particularly in writing, because you know, goals represent to people a lot of failure. Mark said it, a lot of people are told what to do. A lot of people don't see goals as theirs. They see goals as the workers. So we need to be careful about that, and we need to help people through the process. But the theory is a good one. We want people to identify the things that they want to work on together. And it's one way to do it. If it works, definitely. But if you're losing people, think about another way that you can accomplish the same things that you're doing with that. The other thing that people can do is they can understand rapid rehousing, that it's time limited, and we want people to make a plan about how they're going to move on from rapid rehousing early on. People can also rent a portion of a home. For single people, oftentimes rapid rehousing covers a room's rent or something like that. People can also get a live-in aid, particularly if they're bridging to some sort of subsidy. And the live-in aid actually is something that people can help people maintain in housing, particularly if they have a lot of medical or even psychiatric issues. You can use it as a bridge to PSH, probably less PSH units done, that's permanent supportive housing, but you can also use it as a bridge to housing authority properties. Be aware that there's a new vouchers coming down. I believe we just talked to Rachel, there's 120, so keep in touch with the Housing Alliance, your local continuum of care, and your coordinated access. These units are going to go through coordinated access, and they are lowered eligibility criteria. So in fact, drug and alcohol history will have less of an effect on this. They also provide money for housing location. What they don't provide is services money. So talk to your continuum of care about how you do this. But if you have services and you need housing, this might be for you, and that might be something your continuum is interested in. And that might be a good bridge for rapid rehousing. Okay. There we go. So the other thing we want to think about is what are the tools in this negotiation? And one of the things that we tend to use is harm reduction. And harm reduction is a perspective and a set of practical strategies to reduce negative consequences of drug use. So let me stop there. Harm reduction, despite popular opinion, does not go to changing the consequences of any kind of behavior. It goes to changing the behavior to change the consequences. And it incorporates a spectrum of strategies. A lot of times it's used for health interventions like needle exchange. A lot of times it's used for substance. Here, we're going to use it for housing access. So let's talk about how we can do that. So this is not eviction. I'm sorry, I didn't switch this. So access. Family says they need a large apartment in a specific area, but income will not support it. Sounds like something you're doing. So what are the options? What could they do to solve this problem? We're going to reiterate that they want to get housed. We're going to reiterate their long-term goals. And then we're going to ask them to just look at smaller apartments in this area. That will, and what do they think the factors in favor of this is? And this is what you ask the client. Might expand possibilities for housing, and it might allow them to stay in the same area. What are the factors against? I can't live in a small apartment with children. It's just too much. And I need my privacy. Okay, so now we know something. So non-negotiable is the parent must have some privacy. And the other is the non-negotiable is that large apartments in the area, the area they want are expensive. Okay, so what else can we do? We can look at larger apartments in different areas. So privacy is important. So privacy for everyone. I might be able to get a larger apartment outside the area I chose. But this is the goal, to have a good size apartment, and it's maybe my only chance to get a good size apartment. So then we're talking about what are their other chances. But if I move out of this area, I'm going to lose the support and the resources that I have in this area, and my children may have to switch schools, and it feels unsafe to me. So, but having enough space is non-negotiable for this person, and safety is actually non-negotiable. So now we know what we're looking for, right? So what are the other options? They can increase their income, but before they get that larger apartment, they have to start to increase their income. So if they increase their income, their chances of maintaining a larger apartment might be better. So it makes a larger apartment in a specific area more doable, maybe not completely doable. But the landlord may not take me anyway, because I'm never going to get to 3 times the amount. And it's hard for me to keep a job. So they must feel safe in the area, and the job is not an option for them right now. That's what they've told us is non-negotiable. It doesn't mean these non-negotiable things aren't going to be negotiated later, but you see the reasons for this. Is this helpful? Would you think this might be helpful? Okay. So I am going to, I am going to clearly just skip ahead here. No, that's not what I'm doing. All right. I am going to divide people up into 2 groups. Actually, I'm not, because it's hard to share this template. So I'm going to switch over to sharing the template, and I want you guys just to call out things that would affect housing access. Okay, stop the share and then do a new share. Sorry about this. I'm a little clunky with this. Okay. Where is it? How is that possible? All right, hold on a sec. Oh. All right, hold on a sec. I apologize. Huh. Okay, hold on. Oh, Oh, I know what I'm doing. All right, sorry. All right. Okay, somebody's there. Okay, so here's a blank one. A lot of work for a blank sheet, right? All right, so give me an example of somebody you're going to negotiate with. You're going to change their behavior in order to improve the effects of their behavior. Anybody have something? Put it in the screen. Yep, it does remove accountability. All right. So let's pick somebody who just wants a Section 8 voucher, okay? You got somebody like that?
Yeah, I've got a couple. I've got man and wife. One receives SSI, one receives SSDI, and they want the voucher. They want it now. They're in a hotel, and they just they want it now. There's no other way to put it.
Okay.
They say they're looking for housing, but nothing really pleases them.
Okay.
They don't have any particular area they're looking at, but they just want to have their rent paid.
Right. Okay. So what are their
Quite
options?
frankly,
Well, that's fine. What are their options?
we have sent them, well, I have sent them on 2 different rentals. And one of them was actually too small, and it's just them 2. It was a 1-bedroom apartment. And it was just too small for their liking. And the other one was too far away.
Okay. So it sounds to me like we got to deal with this wanting a subsidy, right?
Yes.
So they've got to have a path to subsidy. So what might be a path to the subsidy? Because we're going to work rapid rehousing in there. Do you have open lists at your PHAs? Can they get on the list?
Yes, they're on the list.
So they're
Yes.
on the list at the PHA. Okay.
Yes.
So one of the things is being on the list of the PHA. So ask them to talk about the factors in favor of that. What are the factors in favor of that? What are the things that they would like about being on the list? They'll eventually get a subsidy, right?
They'll eventually get a subsidy. They'll be able to save a lot of, the rent will be paid more than, well, about 90%. Actually 60%, excuse me, 60 to 70%,
Well,
because they
it's
want a
actually
mainstream voucher.
30% of their income will go for rent. 30% of
30% of their income, yes.
There you go.
They're after a mainstream voucher is what they really want.
So they want a mainstream voucher. So they got it on the list. So the factors in favor is eventually they'll get it, right?
Mhm.
And that they'll pay 30% of their income for rent, right? And that they'll be able to get what can they get on this mainstream voucher? So maybe one of the factors against, because they didn't like the 1-bedroom apartment, what are they going to get? Are they going to get a voucher for a 2-bedroom apartment?
So.
No,
so
it's a
if I
set
may,
amount.
So they're going to get a voucher for a 1-bedroom apartment because the rule is 2 heartbeats per room and they're married.
Right.
Mark,
Yep.
you want to say something?
Yeah, I was gonna say, Jen, and I think you're doing the right thing. You're setting them up to look at certain apartments. Because it sounds like to some extent, they need a reality check. So yes, you're getting the voucher. It's gonna take a little bit, so you gotta be patient. And that's a big sell, is you gotta be patient. A lot of people aren't patient. And then in the meantime, you're showing them apartments and, oh, it's too small. Oh, it's too far away. And it's like, okay, so this is probably what you're going to be eligible for. So you need to think about where you're at now. And then in a year, maybe you would be eligible for a different apartment after the inspection. So I think by letting them go out and look at what's out there is really a good technique for a wake-up call.
It is, well, okay. We need to be a little careful about wake-up calls, right? Because usually people who have been homeless, when they get a wake-up call, like, you're not getting what you want, this is what we have, right? Is that, because we talked about this before, is that they say, forget it. What my clients used to say to me is, yeah, you know what? I want a smart case manager. I don't want a dumb case manager. That's not how they put it, actually. They said, I don't want a dumbass case manager like you. I want a smart case manager. So that was actually better than saying, I'm out of here. You guys are terrible. But one of the things that we need to do is be careful about people walking away. So maybe we need to, I agree with you, you're going to show them other apartments, but only when we've talked through the options and made the long-term option of the voucher a real deal. The other
Yeah, so they've
thing-
eventually, they didn't exactly want the referral to stand by me when I first got with them, and, you know, and they come on my caseload, but now they've accepted the help since they've declined both apartments and they still are in the hotel. Now I explain to them what Sarah Cha-Cha can do with the long-term goals, and explain to them that that was going to be what they would probably going to be, 2 heartbeats in 1 room kind of thing, and they're married. And now they've accepted that referral to United Way for Stand By Me. So they're going to go see that person for the long-term goal of waiting to get that Section 8 voucher.
That's it.
So I
there
think
you
we've
go.
broken through a little bit, but that had been the holdup the whole time, I think.
But you know what? That's exactly right, Jen. And you just did harm reduction, right? We're
Yeah.
telling people that they can change, right? They can change the effects of their behavior by changing their behavior, right? So they're going to eventually get what they want, and you've got a plan, right?
Yes.
It may be that this emergency voucher, they might be perfect for one of those, right? So maybe they'll
Yes.
get it quicker, right? And then they're no longer going to say, I want a smart case manager. They're going to say, oh, you're a smart case manager. But in fact, they thought of it themselves. So they're willing to pursue those 2 goals, the long-term goal and the short-term goal. That's harm reduction, y'all. Is this helpful to you, this sort of way to do it? I should say that most harm reduction specialists would have a stroke when they saw the non-negotiable, right? But when we're dealing with people, there's some rules that can't be changed. We use this to keep people in housing too. What's non-negotiable? Paying rent, right? How you pay rent might be negotiable, but paying rent is not negotiable. So people need to know what the structure is, right? But they need to be able to process the factors in favor and the factors against. And it sounds like you went back and did this process. Is this help? Can anybody think about using this? Yeah.
It's kind of like what we already do. I mean, it's non-negotiable about them paying rent. It's non-negotiable about them speaking to us weekly or monthly once they move in. You know, they have to work with us as case managers, you know, to let us know that the need's still there. So it's just putting it in a nice format, basically. I mean, I'm
It's
all about
actually-
forms.
Yeah, me too. I don't know if everybody loves forms. I hate forms, but you know what? This provides a structure for people. And we also know that we have a lot of people who are compromised in executive functioning. And one of the things that means is focusing skills, organizational skills, task prioritizations, but an important thing in executive functions, which is developed in late adolescence, early adulthood, is that people respond better to forms and graphs and stuff like that than they do to just written directions. So having a hard time following verbal directions is part of who we're dealing with. So forms help in that way because we've designed these forms to be comparable with something called cognitive remediation, which are targeted at people's executive functions. So that's another reason why I like this form. Of course I like it. I made it up. Okay.
Well, and like Jen was just saying, a lot of this stuff we do every day.
Yes.
And I am a firm believer of keeping it real
Yep.
with the client.
Yep.
Because what happens is they walk away and say, oh, well, you promised me this, you know, and because you're trying to, for lack of better words, be nice to them and coddle them and stuff like that. But in reality, that's not what they're going to get. So,
Okay, but you know what? The other thing that we're doing when we're teaching these critical thinking skills is we're mentoring people to accept services in the future, right? And that you know, a lot of people talk about enabling. I think enabling is a great thing. You don't want enable people to do the wrong thing, right? You don't want to enable people to sit in the hotel. You want to enable people to make decisions that are in their best interest. And that it's the way you do it. Yeah, it's not, I'm not gonna, I mean, you can't offer things that you don't have, but you help it be part of the decision-making process, and these structures do it. I also think you guys do a lot of this anyway, right? And that you should know that all of this stuff in this PowerPoint is based on real practice. It's modeled on what people already do. So it's great that you see these things. The idea in this is to put some structure around it and also to make it more uniform across the board, right? So that the services have similarities. So if somebody goes from one service to the other, they can expect some of the same things. But that's great that you're already doing it, and that's fabulous. Think about if this structure might be helpful to you. Okay, let's go to the next one. Is everybody seeing my slides? Okay. So we've got the clients on board. Now we got to engage the landlords, right? So part of it is we want to go to networks that landlords use and make the pitch to that landlord. And we're going to practice a pitch in a little bit. So we want to look at real estate boards. We want to look at realtors. We want to look at chambers of commerce. We want to look at service organizations, right? Who are the guys with the hats? You know, we want to look at those sorts of things. We want to go to Toastmasters. We also want to, and I know, Mark, you work with veterans. I'm assuming a lot of people work with veterans too, is that one of the, you work specifically with veterans. We want to go to veteran service organizations, right? And then a lot of people who volunteer in the veteran service organizations may have a couple of units and may be interested in helping out a fellow vet. We want to ask the landlords for introductions, and that means that we have cultivated them as a resource. Ideally, what you want people to do is call you with available apartments, that you don't have to do chase management by running around and all those cold calls. Those are important in the beginning. We want to establish our own network. We want to always provide them with contact information of people they can get a hold of if they need help or if they have apartments available. We want to also explain our role. So the same thing that we were just talking about, we want to explain our role in the positives. What can we do? We can help them resolve any problems in housing. We like to do this early. We appreciate a heads up. We're going to help people. You know, if somebody is carrying on and having a big party in the middle of the night, are we going to show up? No. But you know what we're going to do? We're going to teach people how to deal with the way they usually deal with those problems. If they usually call the police, great. We're going to train people how to deal with the police. We're going to train people about tenancy. We're going to work together to get the best tenants. We're going to acknowledge what landlords want, which is a full apartment, a full rent, right? And we're going to talk about how we can be helpful in there. We're not going to guarantee rent, right? But we're going to talk about how we can work with people to support the landlord's rent demand. We're going to develop a brochure and written materials. We're going to give them some of the VA programs, and HUD Bash give people a card that says, if these things come up, please call this person. We're going to develop a brochure about what we can provide. We're going to look for advantages for landlords, weatherization possibilities that are through your local HUD office that will give people a way to make their building more airtight and more efficient as far as energy is concerned, have been a big help with landlords. Those little things, especially small landlords, don't have access to. It's a simple Google search. And we're going to help people apply. We're going to minimize risks. We're going to talk about mediation. We're going to talk about resolving conflicts. I don't know if you guys have, there's a lot of people who have contingency funds. Rachel, do you have contingency funds where they will make a landlord whole if something happens to their apartment?
Alice, are you still here? I'm going to call on Alice from Delaware State Housing Authority is here. I don't know if she's available to answer. I know that DSHA had been working to put something like that together, but I don't know where it is in the process or if it's available for folks.
That's often very, very very reassuring to landlords. And I'll tell you something, usually they have a small amount of money in it. I mean, I think like big counties in California have like $30,000 and people rarely apply for it. It's much more of something that helps landlords commit because they're convinced that your people are going to tear up their apartment. And the truth is they're less likely to tear up the apartment. Yeah.
We
Mark.
do have a mitigation fund.
Right.
Alice said our microphone's not working. In Sussex County, we finally did get a landlord mitigation fund.
And is that reassuring to landlords?
You're welcome, Alice. Yes, we have used it maybe 2 or 3 times, I think. But we have finally gotten that through. We've been working on that for a couple of years and we have gotten that through.
It's much more effective in it's much more effective in the pitch than it is in reality because very few people use it. And the good news is people aren't tearing up the apartments. Mark, you wanted to say
No,
something?
and Alice was instrumental in that because she has asked for that
terrific.
for many years, I understand.
Good partnership.
Yeah.
Mark, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, SSVF doesn't really have a contingency fund, so to speak.
Right.
We do supply deposits.
Yep.
So the client is able to get into the apartment, first month's rent, stuff like that. And the deposit goes with the client. So that promotes a little bit more, hey,
Yep.
if you trash the place, you're not going to get the deposit. If you take care of it, that money will go with you when you go to move.
Yep. So that's important.
Yeah, so that does help. My question is, it may not apply to this slide, but SSVF, generally speaking, only has 90 days to work with somebody. And you're not going to change habits that have been developed for a long period of years in those 90 days. So I'm just curious to how everybody else or how long they actually are able to work with their clients that help start developing these changes.
In Delaware, you heard that it's, anywhere up to a year. It generally refers to the funding source. 90 days in SSVF is really short. So it's your specific SSVF. If you're going on those regional calls with SSVF, that's a question I would ask and try to, I agree, 90 days is too short. I know SSVF is also moving towards a CTI perspective where you're training people to stay in their apartments. And that one of the reasons they're moving towards that is because the recidivism rate is high in some places, and that you want to make a correlation between the recidivism rate and the 90 days, and also look at some of the practices that SSVF are implementing across the country. And they tend to be 6 to 9 months, but you can extend SSVF beyond that, and the services can be extended. So you may want to talk to your local, who's your regional coordinator in Delaware? What's their
For
name?
SSVF is Mars.
Norris? Okay.
Mars.
Mars.
I
Okay.
don't.
So talk to, so either you or somebody in your agency should talk to Mars. Mars would be open to extending it beyond that. Most SSVF are, and Mars really understands CTI. And that if you talk about that and you need more time for stabilization, she's going to get that immediately. So Mars used to work out of the Indianapolis office, and that's what they're doing there.
Yeah, I had developed a training program for homeless population. And through my studies and putting the training program together, I determined that at a minimum, it's going to take 6, 7, 8 months to get a person moving in to really be able to do it on their own thought.
That's absolutely what the research says, but she's in particular would be open to that. So that would be my suggestion.
So we do have the option in SSVF to recert people every 90 days.
Yep.
Which we do quite frequently.
And that's fine.
Up to a max of a year. So we do have that option.
So that's really helpful, right? So it's up to a year. So you may want to take a look at CTI because 90 days would work as far as a step down. And it goes with the 6 to 9 months, which is how long it takes for people to stabilize. And the transition is over in 6 to 9 months. So that's the other thing. You want to assist people through the transition, which is really SSVF. So it's good you can extend people, and that's really important. but you want to put that as part of your structure. The other thing you want to do with landlords is you want to mediate, you want to convene a breakfast or a lunch. So we used to do a breakfast for landlords. Actually, the PHAs helped us with this, and we gave awards for landlords. Best communicator, fastest turnover, right? All the things we wanted. We gave an award for good hair. I mean, we would do anything, right? We want to recognize them, and it goes towards recognizing strong partners. Landlords very rarely get positive feedback because they're always in a position of enforcing rules or enforcing rent. One of the things that we want to do, we also use faith communities and those community services and those community groups and also veterans organizations to recruit landlords. And then we write a note in their newsletter, or in the church bulletin. Thank you, Rachel Stucker, for really making homelessness, putting homelessness firmly in the past for some of our clients. I mean, those sorts of things. People really appreciate that, and it gets the community behind it. By the way, faith groups often have a lot of resources, and one of the things that we've done is had them do some, offer other services through volunteers to the people we work with the person's consent and with the person's wanting it, and people can be part of that community. So that obviously we're not going to shove a faith down somebody's throat, but if that's something people are interested in, there are a lot of resources there, and that often gets other church members or mosque members or synagogue members involved in, and getting positive feedback for offering things. That doesn't work for everybody, right? Some people are pretty secular. Some people really yearn for that faith community connection. We want to offer that if it's possible. We're also going to develop a landlord network. So one of the things we recommend to people, and if you guys want to roll your eyes, feel free, I always did, but Go Section 8 is important and also gives you a clue. Oftentimes the listings are outdated, but you want to Go Section 8. I just put the one in Wilmington, but if you Google it, it'll be there. There's also a kind of housing that advertises as affordable housing. You want to talk to people who have been working with affordable housing in the past, and they may not, what's available on the list may be outdated, but they may have other resources, and those are landlords we want to cultivate. We also want to develop a relationship with HUD-funded projects for seniors, people with disabilities. We definitely want to develop a relationship with the PHA. We want to look at tax credit properties, which as part of their funding, their initial capital funding, reduce the rents for some people. It's not technically subsidized housing, but it's targeted at people who are 20 to 30%, 30 to 40%. So they're bands. And in fact, the rents are reduced and might be more valuable to people. Jen, one of your couples might be perfect for one of the senior housings, those sorts of things. So they could take a look at that. The other thing is you want to work with other projects doing housing location in your area. You don't want to be competing for rare resources, right? And there's going to be a whole bunch of money coming out about for housing location for these new emergency vouchers that are coming out of the PHA through the continuum of care or through the coordinated access system. You don't want to arrive at a place with a client and have 4 other clients doing it. You want to coordinate that. Actually, frankly, it's been done through SSVF in California, but having a central database can be really helpful. It's also really hard to negotiate. Most people feel like their resources are their resources. I admit to feeling that way myself, and that it's hard to do it. But if you find yourself competing for rare resources, just getting together and going over opportunities with other people who are doing housing location in your area, you're all after the same apartments, and competing with each other is not helpful. You also want to recruit landlords. You want the support from the case management team. Case management is a way to really sell this. You want success stories from other landlords. That means you have to have a success stories. You want to really be able to articulate, right? This is about the pitch, the benefits of working with your program. And you want other landlords to take some of the lead in promoting it. You want to express appreciation of landlords. We write them notes. We put bulletins in there. You want to, but also hold the landlord accountable to what your expectations are. So just like with something called the payment contract that they do with the PHA, housing payment contract, you want to take a look at that. You want to make sure that you make it clear to landlords, you expect them to enforce the lease in a fair and processed manner. You want to make sure that it's decent housing. You want to provide resources to them. A lot of those are available through HUD and are no cost to us. You want to look at this contingency plan. You want to make sure we support landlords, but we want to make sure we have clear expectations of landlords. So as we're working with the providers, we want to respond to the problems quickly. Landlords want to be able to get a hold of people. We want to teach tenancy skills and have people exercise the full rights and responsibilities of tenancy. You want to, sorry, there we go. I'm just checking the chat. All right. We want to make sure that you maintain relationships and that we make landlords whole, not necessarily through our own funds, but work with our partners to see what's available. Contingency funds are a good thing. And you don't ever want to promise what you can deliver. I don't know if you guys have ever done this, but I've said to landlords when I was desperate, I'm available 24 hours a day. And sure enough, they love to call me at 3 o'clock in the morning. That taught me a lesson. I never said that again. I instead talked to landlords about what they would do in the middle of the night and how we would help them follow up on those issues. We want to also have clear protocol with our staff about communicating with housing providers. We want clear guidelines. We suggest that people obviously go with people when they meet with the landlords, that you be there at the lease signing so we have a relationship with the landlord. We actually ask case managers to call at least monthly or visit them at least monthly. You want to catch problems early and you want to provide the landlord some support. And everybody we work with should know about that because our job is to help them maintain housing. We want to ask them to copy the case management staff on notices. That doesn't always happen, but we want to ask for that. We want to also be clear about what's confidential versus public information in terms of protected health information. We don't ever want to share, even with a release, details of the person's health history. We are going to be asked by the landlord. We want to practice with the staff. So here's an example I often give. The landlord says, oh God, Rachel has been doing all this stuff. What's wrong with her anyway? We don't want to say exactly what all the information we know, but what we want to say is, some of that I really can't talk about, but tell me what you're worried about. Let's talk about that. And remember that public information, stuff that's publicly observed, is not confidential. We want to make sure that we have policies and procedures for home visits, for resolving problems and roles, for emergencies, for on-call. Home visits are essential to help people access and maintain housing. We want to go with people because skill building is a big part of this. We want to address tenancy issues in team meetings. We want to problem solve together in supervision. We want to do cross training and we want to, offer some training to the landlords. And one of the things that we have at the bottom of this is CSH has a property manual, property operations manual. And the trick to this manual is in the appendix, there are letters that landlords can write to people if people are in violation of the lease. And they're perfect. They're CC'd to the case manager, and they help landlords really uniformly enforce the lease, and they can just download the appendix to their computer and just put the person's name in there. So it doesn't, a lot of landlords say, yeah, I'm not going to write a letter. I'm just going to tell them as much as formal process as possible, because we're not only helping people maintain housing, and this can be very helpful with that, but we're also teaching people tenancy skills so they can move anywhere they want. And we talked about a lot of people have long-term goals to move other places. So this has been very helpful to specifically the small landlords, but even to some of the property management groups, they've really liked this. And it's a resource we can offer to landlords. So we want to provide those resources. We also want to celebrate landlords in any way we can. We also want to teach people obligations of the lease and explain the lease. You know, many people don't read the lease. Have you ever read a lease? I mean, leases say party of the first part, party of the second part. It's really confusing. We want to teach people basic tenancy. What's quiet enjoyment mean? It means you don't play your music loud after a reasonable time, like 9 or 10 o'clock at night, so it disturbs other tenants. We want everybody to have a peaceful experience in their homes. We want you to have one. We want everybody else to have one. And that's why this is in the lease. We want to talk about criminal activity, what it looks like, why it's a problem in common areas and grounds. We want to talk about keeping units free of clutter and health hazards. And we want to do that as part of the housing location process, because people should know what are the expectations before they decide on an apartment. What are the reasons for the health and safety hazards? What does it mean to be hoarding? What does it mean to block egress? What's egress? We want to explain those. We want to explain about disposing of garbage and waste appropriately. That's often a problem in many programs. So we want to talk about that. We want to talk about paying rent and why paying rent. Tenants in buildings often say the landlords get so much rent, they're rich. They don't need my rent. Yes, they do. And this is the reason. We want to keep utilities current and paid. Why do we want to do that? Because it doesn't meet housing quality standards if they're not. So that we want to keep utilities, plus the fact that's an easy one, because you can always tell when somebody's utilities are cut off because they put a big orange extension cord right out their door. And then people have the nerve to say to me, how do you know my electricity's cut off? My lights work. Well, I don't know, but that big orange extension cord was a big clue. So we want to talk to people about that. We want to talk to them about what the expectations are so they know what they're getting into. And also we can prepare them for tenancy. The competition. Okay. The competition is, yeah. We also want all the staff to have basic skills. Local landlord and tenant law. We also ask people to, oops, this is California, but we can get you another one. I'm sorry about that. We want them to know what the financial application is. What are the requirements if people do have a subsidy, since a lot of people need a subsidy? What are the requirements under rapid rehousing? What are apartment standards? What do we look like and what do we look at? And what are the requirements under a subsidy? What are the subsidized housing rules and process? And what are negotiation skills? And what they can do with, we want to include things like landlords usually, if you're not subsidized, landlords look at three times the rent as income. Why do they do that? Because they want people to pay the rent. So let's talk about how we can reach that goal. But we want to talk to people about this. Here are some tenants' rights by state. And this is a rent-wise workbook. And we actually give this to tenants. It can be done in COVID because it can be individually, it can be in a group. Groups are really important. You can download it, it's free. I would give it to the shelters and the outreach teams so they can start people in the process. It also starts to coach people for those landlord interviews, which is really important. This is obviously not the only one out there. Feel free to look for other ones. This is just one that we found helpful in the past. So let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges in housing location. So sometimes the apartments that are affordable are not in good shape and they're not in preferred neighborhoods. Sometimes there's safety concerns. Sometimes landlords raise their rents over an affordable level to avoid people on Section 8 or rapid rehousing. Sometimes landlords rely on credit checks. Sometimes landlords are demanding 3 times the rent as a monthly income, even if the person is being subsidized. Sometimes they rely on criminal background checks, and sometimes they demand a landlord reference. So let's think about how we can do that, right? So,
Andrea, can
yep.
I just had a quick, I was hoping you could address this. I know that we hear from our rapid rehousers too, that some landlords require the person to be employed. So even though at the time that they're renting, so even though the rapid rehousing program doesn't require employment. Sometimes a landlord might require employment. So I was wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit about that as well.
Sure.
I didn't
So
mean
we want to do this. So that principle, even with landlords. So tell us what this gets you, and let's tell us how, not everybody is going to be employed. So, I mean, if you only take people who are employed, that's something we can consider for your properties, but tell us why you have that. And usually it's so people get the rent, right? It's also sometimes so people are out of the house for a certain amount of time. So we want to try to address those things. So we want to have a conversation with the landlords. The other thing we want to do is ask them if they take Section 8 or HUD subsidies, and talk about the similarities and the differences between rapid rehousing and Section 8. And that oftentimes we target landlords, and a lot of the affordable properties do have some Section 8 units, and your PHA can help you with that. So if you can draw that, and that, I mean, we want to talk about some people are eligible for subsidies. They may be on a waiting list. This is what we're doing in the meantime. We can talk about that through, but usually why landlords are doing it is because they get the rent. And I'll tell you, most landlords with affordable properties love Section 8, because even if they don't get rent from the tenants, though we're not going to encourage that, they should be getting rent from the tenants. But even if they don't get rent from the tenants, the PHA usually covers the mother load of the rent. And so they know they're going to get some rent. So they want some guaranteed rent. We can only guarantee that for 7 months, but they get a chance to evaluate the person. The other thing is they can put those things in place in terms of switching the, continuing the tenancy, is that one of the expectations the landlord can set, which is not a bad one, is the person have income by the time that the rapid rehousing, and they can reinforce that, right? Under fair housing law, you can discriminate about the source of income unless Delaware has something that you can't refuse Section 8. Some places like Oregon have that. You have to accept Section 8. What landlords do is just raise their rents above the Section 8 level. But I think that that's something to consider. So you want to just negotiate with them, and you want to talk about why they want that and how you can help them reach their goal, maybe without the specific thing they put into place. But it's a hard negotiation. The other thing is getting other landlords to talk about the positives of working with your program, is things like, I always get my rent. That's not you guaranteeing the rent. That's just saying, that other landlords have had positive experiences. Those are basically the things that other places do. The other thing is go for some of those mission-oriented landlords. Sometimes they're part of, sometimes they're on the boards of charities, sometimes they're on the boards of, how can we connect to that part? One of the really successful ways that we got landlords to deal with us is oftentimes when I was talking to landlords, particularly small landlords, they would say, you know what, I had an aunt who barely made it in her apartment. She could have really used some case management services. And I appreciate the work that you're doing. I'm going to help you. I'm going to give you one apartment. And that's the way to start. So really have conversations with landlords about what motivates them. That can be helpful too. But we also want to know what the priorities of the landlord are. And often they're getting rent, a well-maintained apartment. And we can get behind that and talk about how case management services can help the person learn those skills. We
So-
also want to.
I have a quick thing to bring up on the income
Okay.
topic. One thing that I've seen over the last 4 or 5 years that I've been doing this is Section 8, HUD-VASH, SRAP. They've gone from a person not needing any income to get a voucher to they require a minimum of like $50 of some form of income, so they pay their utilities.
Yeah.
Now, that's fine and great, but when the state also turns around and tells me that Fred over here can't apply for general assistance because he's capable of working.
Okay, Mark, let me stop you there. There is a waiver that you can request from your local PHA. if your person has no income. They're going to ask them questions about how they meet basic needs to determine if there's an income, but sporadic income is not counted. So if their parents give them $100 every once in a while, if they give it to them every month, that's income. If they give it to them every once in a while, that's not income. So that you want to talk to your local PHA about applying for the waiver, and you can waive that. It is usually a temporary, usually it's reassessed after a period of time. And look, rent is a hard habit to get out of. It's people get out of that habit, and it's very hard for them to get back into it, which is why I think it's good that people pay what they can, but that the PHA is often willing to work with you on it. And if you need to, you can apply for a waiver. So that's one of the strategies. What about, using housing specialists? It looks like a lot of you guys are using a housing specialist. Personally doing landlord outreach, knowing the rights of each tenant, being prepared to talk about the advantages of your program. I want to get to the exercise, so I'm going to go a little fast here. You can talk to each other about what strategies you use, but really defining those in your program. You should also know that during two past administrations, in 2016, the Fair Housing Act issued an interpretation, and that it says that, yes, you can ask about criminal history. Remember, Fair Housing Act includes all housing, right? It's not just for the PHA, but policies that exclude people based on a criminal history must be tailored to serve the housing provider's substantial, legitimate, and non-discriminatory interest. So what they define this as is that because the criminal justice system disproportionately affects people of color, that it is in fact a fair housing violation to do things like saying no felonies, right? However, if you have a drug problem in your building and you don't want to take people with drug histories, that would be tailored to serve the provider's substantial interest. So it's not a total thing, but this is really important. Believe me, housing providers pay a lot of attention to fair housing. The problem is you want to make sure that landlords understand this before you have a person. Because if the person says, I'm not taking them because I don't take anybody with felonies, you say, well, actually, that's a violation of fair housing law. They're going to find something else to reject them on. But if you explain it to people up ahead, and then you have room to negotiate, that might be a good thing. Have people seen this? There's a link in HUD portal to take a look at this. This has been helpful to people in the past. You also want to build a history with providers. We talked about a lot of this. You want clear guidelines when to talk. You want to get people to highlight positive experiences, and you want to develop the pitch. And the pitch is specific to the situation. Wherever you're doing the pitch, it could be in a faith community, it could be, for a service organization, it could be for a landlord specifically. You want to think about your situation and how you might want to pitch it. You want to develop a short speech that reflects the landlord's or group's priorities and address their concerns. You want to mention resources such as other landlords so they can check you out with, and you want to develop a speech that's probably 2 to 3 minutes, but you want to have it uniform throughout your program. So I was going to give you an exercise, but we're running out of time quick, and this is your time. I'm not going to hold you up, but think about developing the pitch and thinking about these questions in your groups, because if you develop the pitch, people are more comfortable approaching landlords, and that it takes into account what the landlord's goals are and what their process is. So I want to pause a little bit before we close up to see if people have questions or if they want some examples or.
Andrea, I do have a question. I've sat through this whole training and I think it was really good. However, I get a little confused with this, and it's probably against most people in the groups of what I believe is necessary. I don't believe I can help most of the people that are referred to me without also helping them find employment. When I looked at the list that you provided for the landlords request. The only one on there I find to be a little out of place is the 3 times the income. I do find that out of place. But I know in the city that I work in and the landlords I deal with, I believe they're very good landlords, very good people that do care.
No.
But I also work in job placement. I tell people from the very, very beginning, you must work with me to get a job, because most of the referrals I get, they have $79 a month income. That's not cutting it. And I tell them, you must work on employment. If you want all the things that I can do, because I am trying in this program, I have 12 months.
Yeah.
The training I did with Pathways, it's a longer period. I have 12 months. It took you a lot longer probably than 12 months to get in this mess. So I have 12 months that do intensive work to get you out of this situation and in some positive situations. And I believe in all the things that are mentioned and how we do that. However, in this 2 hours, I really haven't heard employment mentioned.
You're right.
People must get employment to sustain housing in most
Okay.
cases.
Michael, I absolutely agree with you. And central, it's actually a bigger part of the next training that we're doing, which is sustaining. But that employment is really increasing income is key to this, right? And sometimes people increase their income due to benefits, but most of the times they need to be employed. I will go even further than that. When we did the rapid rehousing pilot in Connecticut, and we did it teaching an evidence-based practice called CTI, one of the things that they found is people were much more successful if they were connected to employment before they went into housing. And so one of the things that they did is they put a lot of employment resources in the hotels, in the shelters, and actually even had outreach, talk to people about employment. So that what happens, 12 months is a little longer than them. They were 6 months, but in 6 months, somebody may get a job, but they often lose their first job, and it takes a while to get people stabilized. So I absolutely agree. You want to try employment as quickly as possible. The other thing is I think employment services needs to revamp what they're doing. A lot of times we're talking to people in this horrible crisis that need employment about career goals. I think it's important to talk about career goals, but we need to talk to people about goals like making $50 a week, making $100 a week, and increasing their income. So we need to switch the pitch a little bit, and sometimes how we structure our programs so that people can increase income, because the real goal there is increasing income. So we are at 11 o'clock. I'm just going to close up a little bit. And that they basically, it is a 3-part or sometimes 4-part partnership. We need our services. We need the people that we're working with to work with us towards this, and we need the landlords. And how are we going to do that? And oftentimes the program role is that of a facilitator, and we want to conceptualize that. We want to educate everybody about the options, rights, and responsibilities, critical thinking, and we want to do some problem solving. Negotiation is where it's at. The goal is access, but the goal is also sustaining housing, even in location. And it's a good point that Michael brought up. Employment will help people sustain housing. That's what we need. We need to be that people don't return to homelessness. It takes negotiation and it takes skill, and people need a chance to do that. Okay. So we're going to wrap it up. I really appreciate all the participation. I really appreciate you guys doing here. And I know you guys have really hard jobs, and I appreciate the work that you're doing. This is really important. You are ending a crisis in people's lives that is devastating. And it's not easy, and it's certainly not always rewarding, right? How many times do people show up with roses at your door? But you know what? The satisfaction is in a job well done, and the competency in this group is really great, and that we need to think about how we can help people move forward, because people are in awful situations, and we're really helping, and helping in the transition and helping with the access is key. So thank you for all you do, and I appreciate you guys being here. We're going to
Thank you. You did a real good job, Andrea. It's great information.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
All right.
Andrea. If anyone has any lingering questions, would you mind hanging out for a second?
Sure.
Or do you have another like 5 minutes in case anyone has any lingering questions?
Yep, I absolutely do. I can hang out for a bit.
So feel free to ask Andrea if you have any other lingering questions. Otherwise, feel free to go. Thank you guys so much for being here.
Thank you.
We look
You
forward
know
to
what? If you
next
guys
week.
need